Welcome back, everybody. The time is 1:30 and the inquiry is resumed. I have nothing to add in terms of housekeeping updates, so unless anybody else does, we can turn straight to Jessamy Venables. Thank you.
So yeah, if you're happy, sir, I'll introduce our next witness, who's Miss Jessamy Venables, who's just turned on her camera, I can see. Miss Venables, can you see and hear me okay?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear, I think, so far. So let's see how we go. Right, okay. Now, Inspector, Miss Venables has got her main proof of evidence. She's also the author of the original needs assessment, which was called document 1.18, and also the addendum to that work in 2020, which is called document 2.15. So there's the original needs assessment, the addendum needs assessment, and then there's bang up to date Miss Venables' proof of evidence. So, Miss Venables, I will introduce you with reference to your main proof of evidence. You tell us on page 3 of that document that you're Jessamy Venables, a director at Carter Wood. You're a specialist advisor dedicated to care homes, older people's housing and the care village sectors. And as a chartered surveyor, you say since 1997, you've worked in a specialist healthcare team for over 20 years. Is that right?
That's correct, yes.
Could you just give the inspector a flavour of the sort of levels of experience you've got dealing with need assessments and the planning system for things like extra care, other forms of specialist housing for older people?
Yes, of course. At Carter Wood, the company that I work for, act for a wide range of private and not-for-profit care sector clients who commission need assessments for care homes, for housing with care or extra care and care villages. I personally have been involved with a wide variety of different planning applications for private housing with care and retirement villages, as this form of care housing has developed over the past 20 years. I've attended planning appeals as an expert in relation to both care home and care village developments. And just to make you aware, I was involved in the appeals for Walton-on-Thames, for Bath, for Epsom and for Stapleford. So that those are all recent appeals. But also to let you know, I've worked with a variety of retirement care village operators, for example, Audley, and I've visited a number of their schemes, the Extra Care Charitable Trust, who have a number of extra care developments within the West Midlands, with Rangeford, and I know this morning we mentioned their scheme at Corsham, with Richmond Villages. I've been to several of their schemes as well. St Monica Trust, who have 5 or 6 schemes in the Bristol area, and also with retirement villages, and they had some of the very early extra care type care village schemes that I've also been involved with. So I've seen the private extra care market grow over the past 20 years or so as it's developed.
Okay, so with all of that experience then, you're the right person to ask about this. How would you characterise this scheme? I mean, even today, and certainly yesterday, we've had lots of different terms that are being bandied about, if you like. What should the inspector use in your view? What's the right way of describing it and why?
Okay. Just going back to the outline proposal. The outline proposal is for a retirement care village, comprising C2 housing with care, providing communal health, well-being and leisure facilities, as well as affordable dwellings, which is separate to my evidence.
Yeah.
Mr. Sedgwick has outlined the definition, the PPG definition of housing with care, and PPG actually specifies housing with care or extra care, and it is confusing. There's a wide range of terminologies, but we are looking specifically at housing with care or extra care, and those terms can be used interchangeably. This form of accommodation is a specialist form of housing for older people, where a medium to high level of care is available if required. This is the PPG that states this. And that there are often extensive communal areas such as space to socialise or a well-being centre.
So, okay, then What about a retirement care village? When does that how does that relate to the terms extra care and housing with care?
A retirement care village is a larger scale extra care scheme. It's specifically designed accommodation with a comprehensive level of communal facilities, activities, and importantly, care services, which are flexible over time. And that's the PPG definition also. It's the comprehensive level of communal facilities, which I think is the most important wording that they use.
What are the key features, if you like, so far as retirement care villages are concerned, to look out for?
The key features are the wealth of facilities, but also the availability of high quality care, which is available to residents 24/7. And that availability of care was a positive or very positive factor behind residents' decisions to move to a retirement care village in the first place. As set out by ARCO in their document, which is reference core document 7.6.
Be more precise about the facilities, please.
Yes, please.
Okay. In terms of the facilities, it's the wide range of facilities within a care village. So, for example, you have communal internal facilities internal to the care village, which will be cafe, restaurant, gym, well-being facilities, together with those that are external, or rather the gardens, the grounds, and the external facilities that such a care village offers. And I know that Mr. Sedgwick has run through the benefits for the care village, benefits of the care village in terms of the residents' benefits. Improvements in residents' physical health, psychological and social well-being, the reduced reliance on the NHS and resultant cost savings. During the pandemic, physical and emotional benefits that residents felt safe and supported with staff available on site, and also the benefits in terms of staff. The location of residents on one site means that reduced staffing requirements are possible when compared to older people living in their own homes in disparate locations across a wider geographical area. So those are the benefits the benefits of actually living within a care village.
Could I just, those as benefits for some of the residents, people who might live there. Just on the inspector's question about facilities, do I take it then that there's in the way you put your descriptions of these facilities, there's a distinction even within this umbrella of extra care between the sort of smaller extra care schemes, I don't know how big, but smaller housing with care, and then a retirement care village, which would be at a larger scale. And you've just said that the larger scale retirement care village would have these sort of extra facilities, and you've identified some of them. I wondered whether, just to try and help the inspector, and again, this might help once he's actually visited one, wherever it might be, but could you give us as much as you can, really help on what sort of facilities we're talking about? Would you like take an extra care scheme and turn it into a retirement care village, what you'd call a retirement care village?
If I take an example of the two extra care schemes that are currently located within the market catchment and the local authority catchment, okay. They provide a range of facilities, a smaller range of amenities, perhaps a lounge, a dining room, an activities room and a cafe. But I think the difference between those sorts of smaller scale extra care schemes...
Sorry, I'm so sorry to jump in. So just to take it in stages, those are the local ones, or the local, within the East Cams, within the market catchment. Cafe, meeting area, sort of small level of communal facilities, you say.
That's right. They would be more akin to sheltered accommodation, where you've got a lounge, perhaps, and a cafe. With a larger care village, yeah. It enables a large care village. It enables the development of a wider range of facilities, and by that I mean a library, a lounge or lounges, bars, cafe, restaurant, those sorts of facilities on site, together with the health and well-being facilities, which also incorporate a gym, a well-being centre, treatment rooms, a spa, hairdressing salon, nail bar, all sorts of other facilities which would be incorporated within the central community area, but also externally. And this is important. I think some of the existing smaller extra care schemes provide very little in terms of garden areas, landscape gardens, Also areas where residents can continue gardening and enjoying the outside life as they would have done in their own homes. So it's that wealth of external facilities where, for example, classes can take place outside during the summer also, and areas for people to enjoy being outside with their families.
So when you use that language of care villages, that's what you're talking about, that sort of almost that larger scale extra care with the community.
Right. It's the development of a whole community, which is important in terms of people getting to know each other within that community, and the health and well-being and the social interaction that is enabled by being in that wider village community, where families can come in and spend time with their loved ones and enjoy the external facilities outside of the main buildings as well.
What do you see when it comes to these retirement communities, but the benefits of them, not just for the residents, but for others, for the local community? What's your take on that? Yeah,
there are a variety of benefits for the local community. I think first and foremost, when relatives have concerns about their family, about mum and dad, for example, it can be difficult to find a reliable domiciliary care provision within one's own home where they may have lived for many, many years. And ensuring that care is monitored appropriately and safely. I think it provides a village setting where they know that their loved ones can be cared for, where there's someone overseeing their care, and where there are people there to ensure that they receive that care. So that's one of the benefits of the local community, that it assists families to find care. The second one is the ability to remain living independently within their existing community. So older people, and I'll go on to this in a moment, but older people who currently live within the wider Bottisham community can continue to live in that community rather than having to go elsewhere. Thirdly, it encourages the release of under-occupied general housing. That would indirectly help everyone within the property life cycle, especially first-time buyers, to ensure that it frees up general housing which might otherwise be under-occupied by older people.
What do you see as the key advantages, if you like, of the retirement care village model, as you've defined it, against over and above the smaller extra care schemes that we find, say, within East Cambridgeshire? I mean, there's one.
I think it's the encouragement that it offers for older people to be encouraged to leave a home that they may have lived in for many years. As you'll be aware, there's a high proportion of older people who own their own homes within the local authority area. And I know Mr. James touched on this yesterday afternoon, but I would no means force anybody to move from their existing homes, but I think by providing a care village which is appealing to older people, that will enable them to have a choice and therefore to choose whether or not to perhaps move to that scheme. But it needs to be appealing in order to give them the option to sell their own homes, to move into that scheme and to make that change in their lives.
In my opening, relying on some of your evidence, I talked about downsizing or right sizing, about moving at the right time. Could you explain to the inspector what your evidence is on that, why you say that's important?
Yeah, it's the intention that older people, if they are going to move to a retirement care village, that they do so at the right time. And by that, I mean when they are relatively well and able. I think you have to bear in mind that someone has to sell their own home and then choose to buy an apartment within a retirement care village. It needs to be attractive to them, and they need to be able to be physically fit enough to go through a process of selling their existing home and moving to the scheme. The general age of people living within a retirement care village tends to be between 70 and 90, but of course they can enter the scheme from 65 onwards. Over the last 20 years, we have had the growth in the private extra care concept, the private extra care village. Almost all existing care villages and almost all existing private extra care accommodation is for sale on a long leasehold basis. More recently, in the past 5 years, there has been the growth of the rental model, the opportunity to move into a care village on the basis of the rental model, which would be based on private market rent. And I suppose it's to put it in layman's terms, it's the try before you buy concept. Elderly people may not want to move to alternative accommodation, but it allows families to say, well, why don't you move in for a short time and see how it goes? It gives them the opportunity to try the care village before they take the leap of faith and decide to move in and to buy an apartment. Alternatively, there are older people that perhaps choose not to sell their own home and may well rent an apartment as an option rather than selling their own home, and maybe the family will move into that in due course. But that has been the recent growth in the private rent side of things. And this goes on to my comment that, or the comment that I know Dr. Keith is very concerned about, and that is the possibility that people with continuing care needs would be sort of the top priority for people moving into care villages. That wasn't my intention at all, to state that it would be that there would be an awful lot of people coming in who have continuing healthcare needs. It's just that the operators have the opportunity within the market rent, private market rent option, that they have the opportunity for older people to perhaps step down from hospital where their own homes perhaps are no longer suitable for them, and they've got the option to try a care village if that was what might be suitable for them. And I know Dr. Keith this morning mentioned 3 individuals, A, B, and Mrs. C. Sorry, I didn't get the Mr. and Mrs. A and B. But those sorts of people would not be the sorts of people that a care village would be suitable for. They are people who have nursing and dedicated dementia care needs, in my view, and would be best suited to go into a care home that would care for their needs. However, I say the market rent option does allow people the option to try a care village rather than having to move in on the long leasehold basis in the first instance.
Miss James, for the local authority, talked quite a lot about personal choice. She said personal choice very important, and the council wanted to see, people being able to exercise personal choice. What are your reflections on the extent of personal choice that residents in this part of East Cambridgeshire have?
I think she's absolutely right. Personal choice is important. Some elderly people would like to move to a new home in a care village. Others, probably the last thing they would ever want to do, they would rather prefer to remain in their own homes. As I say, a trial period within a care village is an option for older people, and it may make them realise that perhaps it's entirely suitable for them, and they would like to live there. They see the options for meeting new friends and doing more things and being able to benefit from the activities that are available. But I think at the moment there isn't very much of an option within the local authority area. There's only one existing extra care scheme, and it's quite a small scheme. So at the moment, there are no options available, or very few options available to older people within East Cambridgeshire. And therefore, it's the choice that this proposed care village would offer them, and a choice of therefore a wider variety of options.
I mean, is there a retirement care village in East Cambridgeshire at the moment?
No, there isn't. No, there is one extra care scheme, and that's located in Ely.
There's the reference, Dr. Keith, to Abbeyfield. Did I get that down right? Abbeyfield as being a facility that she has some familiarity with. Do you recall?
I actually noted within my proof of evidence there are 2 existing schemes. One is located in the local authority area, and that is Roslyn Court.
That's Roslyn Court, exactly, yeah.
And one is located within the market catchment for the proposed scheme, and that is Abbeyfield, Girton Green, which is.
Just because Abbeyfield was the one that she mentioned that I think Dr. Keith knows quite well. And I think she suggested the inspector might go and have a look at it because it's closer by, certainly, to Bottisham. But do you have any reflections on Abbeyfield, sort of the level of comparability to the retirement care village that's on offer here?
Abbeyfield provides extra care. It's an extra care scheme. The breakdown of units is there are 76 units in total, of which 47 of those are available privately, would be recognised as private extra care.
Okay.
The scheme itself is a high-rise scheme. It's located on a fairly tight site, and although it provides extra care and it provides some facilities, it does not provide the wealth of facilities that a care village would offer, nor the space and community space that would be available within this scheme. This is very much a retirement care village, and Abbeyfield Girton Green, I would say, was extra care.
Okay, right. Let's take a step back then from sort of trying to describe these different terms, albeit thank you very much for your assistance on that. Lots of terms to sort of try and get our heads around. Could you give the inspector the key themes that you derive from your review of the documents so far as the national picture, in terms of the need for more retirement care village schemes of the sort before us?
Okay. First of all, and I'm sure the inspector is aware of this, but PPG for older and disabled people, paragraph 1, the need to provide housing for older people is critical. People are living longer lives, and the proportion of older people in the population is increasing. I think it's important that it's not the picture as it is now. The proportion of older people is increasing nationally, so that is why providing that option, or providing a wide variety of options to older people, is becoming more important.
Thank you.
Secondly, I think moving on to adult social care reform as well. Recently, the Minister for Health and Social Care, within a conference, has actually made the point that housing with care is now a pivotal part of adult social care reform. The government see adult social care, or see housing with care, as a priority for a variety of reasons, and they set that out very clearly in the social care white paper, which is quite a recent.
Could you just give the inspector a document reference?
Yeah, I can. It's CD 7.7.
Thank you. And when he gets there, any particular bits you'd like him to note down to have a look at?
Right, I've got most of these printed off, so I just want to go through it. CD 7.7, page 35. Page
35. Okay. All right. Well, I'm sure he can turn that up. You would like to turn it up now, or would you leave it to the inspector? What would you want to show him anything in particular?
Yeah, let's just run through paragraph 4.12.
4.12, page 35.
I'd just like to read it through because I think it's really important.
Yes.
It says, for some of us, the nature of our care and support needs will mean we need a home that is specifically designed to support independent, healthy living. These homes are generally known as supported housing. There is evidence that for both working age adults and older adults, supported housing can be the best model of care to provide better health, greater independence, as well as closer connection with our friends, family and community. In addition, supported housing can be better value than institutional care, for example, residential care or care in a care home, which is often more intensive, and so there is the potential to reduce costs to the health and social care system. Okay,
so what do you draw out of that?
I'd also just like to read, if you look at paragraph 4.13, I'm going to start part way down. It starts with the word yet, which is on the 8th line. Yet the fact is we do not have enough supported housing to keep pace with demand, and we are not building enough to close that gap. The UK has a far smaller proportion of people living in these types of accommodation compared with other countries, around 0.6% compared to around 6% in the United States, 5.5% in New Zealand and 5% in Australia. An important priority for the government in achieving our 10-year vision is therefore to grow investment in both grant-funded and private supported housing to incentivise their supply.
Just to stop you then again, sorry if I'm making this more complicated than it needs to be. Supported housing, the term that's used in this white paper, could you just be clear with us on what supported housing means? Yeah,
supported housing, there are so many different terms, unfortunately, for housing with care, and supported housing is sometimes used for younger adults rather than older adults. But I think within this document they've used the word, or they've used the term supported housing in order to cover both, and they mentioned that it's for older adults as well.
I see. All right. Okay, so that's the national picture.
Could I also? I wanted to just refer to another paragraph within the same document, which is actually on the page before.
Absolutely, yeah. Which paragraph?
It's the end of 4.5 and 4.6. And this covers that point on supported housing, really. This is specifically with regard to older people. And I start paragraph 4.5, 5 lines up from the bottom. It starts for older people. For older people, having a home that sustains safe, independent living.
Yes.
Sorry, independent living can help prevent ill health, reduce the amount of care and support they need, and delay or avoid altogether the need for residential care. However, at present, there are too many people with care and support needs living in homes that are not enabling them to live well or safely. And by that, they mean people's own homes. Many homes are poorly designed for accommodating changing care and support needs or older age. And there are some people who do not have a home to call their own. People who are thinking about the future for themselves or for their loved ones often do not feel like they have options. A lack of suitable housing options, I refer back to that availability of various options, results in too many people staying in hospital unnecessarily or moving to residential care prematurely, even if that is not what they would want, instead of recovering at their own home.
Okay, thank you very much. That's a very useful sort of overview of the national picture and the direction of travel, if you like, nationally. Could we zoom in a bit to the local picture then? What do you say about the local picture so far as the needs arising for this form of accommodation?
Okay, I'm going to cover first of all Cambridgeshire adult social care, and I would draw you to core document 4.13. It's only a short document. It's actually an update to the market position statement, which is now out of date.
Yes, 4.13.
Okay. And there are a couple of paragraphs there which I think are pertinent. The considerable growth forecast amongst the older population over the next 15 to 20 years is likely to require significant growth and development of specialist accommodation with care for older people. So this is within Cambridgeshire. The second paragraph, I think they're highlighted actually on the system, the second one that I highlighted, and I'm going to stop there. And that's with regard to innovation around ideas around tenancy-based models of care, enhanced care and extra care, and embedding nursing care into housing with care were discussed, as were potential market opportunities for blending care types and care operators around a setting to offer a home for life. So that's the way that Cambridgeshire County Council consider that extra care and forms of extra care are progressing, and the fact that they need additional provision.
Mm-hmm.
Can you give me a reference for those paragraphs, please?
It's actually only one page altogether. It's
CD
3.
Yeah, the one that I think we've got the whole market position statement, or I do anyway, as CD.
Yeah, so I've got.
Oh, have you? Okay. Oh, strange. It shouldn't be the whole market position statement. It should just be the update, which is the one that I referred to in my my proof of evidence. I thought that had been changed on the system.
It may be that I'm using an older version. Is that, sir? Is that what you've got?
Although I'm using my internal system, let me go on the website.
Yeah, the website might be the
it had the market position statement, and this is the update to that. If you're on the website, you should be able to find it at 4.13.
Let me just check I've got that before we move on.
It's only one page.
I'm loading up the website now.
Yeah, 4.1. Yes, I think yeah, that is on the website.
Okay, thank you. Got it.
I think the paragraphs were highlighted as well on there.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, lovely. Right. So we've been over the GL Hearn document with Miss James yesterday that was produced on behalf of a few Cambridgeshire authorities and West Suffolk authorities, which sets out some of the expected population growth at different age levels in East Cambridgeshire. You can obviously take us back there if you'd like to. It's called document 4.10, but is there what are the headlines from that document that you'd like to convey to the inspector?
Yeah, to save time, looking at the document which Ms James has confirmed is the up-to-date position, it states under CD 4.10, page 272 and 273, that the housing needs of specific groups report projects a 57.7% increase in the 65 plus population between 2020 and 2040, and that's in the East Cambridgeshire District Council area.
So could you say the reference again, please?
Yes, of course. It's page 272 and 273. On page 272, it's the table at the bottom. There's no number, I'm sorry about that.
Okay.
And my point also there is that when broken down into the age groups, the elderly age groups between 65 and 74, 75 and 84, and 85 plus, the rate of growth is significantly higher for the two oldest groups.
Okay.
Ms James also yesterday was taken to elderly home ownership levels. Yes. And I know that you've also been to those points of reference before, but and I can tell you where they are if you'd like to know. But in terms of the elderly home ownership levels, over 69% of older people households in East Cambridgeshire are owned outright, and over 80% of those aged 65 and over live in underoccupied homes.
Okay, thank you very much.
References for those.
Would you? I think you might have, sir. If you've got a note of the cross-examination of Mrs. James, you may have those references. But would you like them again just now while we're on it?
I don't need them twice. Thank you.
Okay, right. So thank you very much. Now, the level of supply of private extra care, then.
Yeah, private extra care usually, this is nationally, usually lags behind affordable supply. There is a reason for that, and that is because during the late 1980s, 90s, local authorities saw supported housing and extra care as a more affordable alternative to residential care within a care home, and therefore I suppose they started to introduce the extra care concept. And it's only during the past 20 years, I would say since 2000, that the private extra care concept has started to expand, because elderly homeowners see extra care also as a more cost-effective alternative to going into residential care within a care home. And that's the lower levels of residential care within a care home. So that's why it has started to grow and expand during the past 20 years or so. Now, moving to Cambridgeshire, and particularly to East Cambridgeshire, if you go to my proof of evidence, Appendix C, on page 10.
Appendix C. Yeah, so Appendix C starts on page 9 of 27.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay.
And on page 10, I have set out a list of all the extra care provision, and by that I mean both private provision and affordable provision, both within the market catchment for the proposed scheme, which is at the top of the page, and then on the lower section of the page within the East Cambridgeshire District Council catchment area.
Okay, so let's focus on, for now, just East Cambridgeshire, the local authorities area.
Okay.
Just talk the inspector through what we've got.
Yeah, within the local authority area, which is the lower part of the page, you'll see Roslin Court is highlighted in bold. If you go across along the line, you will see that there are a total of 57 extra care units at Roslin Court, and all 57 of those are private units. Now, Roslin Court is the only private extra care scheme currently existing in East Cambridgeshire, and that's in Ely. There are 4 other schemes, which are listed below: Baird Lodge, Beech Court, Millbrook House and Nest Court, which all provide extra care units. They are affordable extra care units. So therefore, if you look at the bottom of the page, there are a total of 57 private extra care units out of a total extra care provision of 271 units. And if you look to the right-hand side, I've just made the note that private supply is therefore just over 21% of total provision.
And what does that tell us, that 21% figure? Is that high, low, or somewhere in between?
Well, the point I would make is that it is significantly lower than elderly home ownership at 69% in the East Cambridgeshire District Council area. And therefore, there isn't suitable provision with just 57 units in Ely, which is right in the north of the catchment, to cater for all those people who live in East Cambridgeshire, who have their own home, who may want to downsize.
I see. Okay. Now, on this list, one question about Roslin Court is, and just to be absolutely clear, private extra care tick, you've noted. Just to be clear, to what extent does Roslin Court, to what extent would you describe it as a retirement care village proposition?
Again, I wouldn't describe it as a retirement care village. It is extra care. It provides extra care housing. It's actually one of the McCarthy and Stone schemes.
Right.
You probably heard of McCarthy and Stone, but it's a scheme that provides care as well. So it's very much one of their standard schemes, which has a lounge, an area for meeting friends, garden area, and some limited facilities. And there is also the provision of 24/7 care if it is required. And I looked at the information about the scheme. I think only a small proportion of people are actually using the care at the moment. So I think in terms of choice, if that is the limited choice available, then it's not as we talked about in this scheme. It's not that it's not going to attract people to Ely, to that scheme. It doesn't provide a wealth of facilities.
You've talked a bit about focusing, turning to the market catchment. You talked about Abbeyfield a bit already, but the next one down on your list is Millview, St Edmunds Way, Hawkston in Cambridge. And I mentioned that one because I think that was the one that we heard about a little bit from Mrs James, the local authority, yesterday, and I promised that I'd come back to you to ask you about it. Because I think it's one that she thought there were lots of vacancies for, and she thought it was a comparable scheme to our scheme, I think she said. So that suggested a hesitancy. Do you remember that word she used, hesitancy, about people taking up our sort of provision? So yes, please, your comments on Millview.
Okay, Millview opened in late 2019, so it's been open just over 2 years. Probably the worst time it could open, actually, just before the pandemic, unfortunately. It's an extra care scheme. It's not a care village. It's an extra care development, in my view, and it's owned by BPHA, which are a housing association. They state themselves that they are a provider of affordable homes for rent, sheltered residential care, and shared ownership.
Right.
Now, shared ownership is the important element here. This is a high-rise scheme. It's set over 4 floors. It has 45 units for affordable rent. So that would be social care, and 25 units for shared ownership. Just to confirm, you cannot buy an apartment. You cannot buy 100% of an apartment in this scheme. It is only available as shared ownership. So in order to buy into this scheme, you can sell your own home, but you can only buy a 50% share up to a 75% share of an apartment. In my view, it falls between 2 stools. homeowners who have their own home at the moment have built up equity in their own home. And bear in mind that 69% of people who own their own home in East Cambridgeshire own them outright. I don't think that they would choose to sell that home to move into a social housing development when they're not renting at affordable rent. They are buying a proportion of a unit. Just going on, extra care. It's extra care rather than a retirement village. It has limited facilities, and those facilities are on a particularly tight site which overlooks a main road junction. Again, I don't think people would choose to sell their existing home to buy a proportion of an extra care unit. And I would question how appealing that scheme is and how attractive it is to downsize. Furthermore, I would also question, given the existing supply of affordable units in both the market catchment and the local authority catchment, and the significant percentage of affordable units in the market catchment. I said it was 21% in the local authority catchment. In the market catchment, there's only 8.6% of units that are private. So there's a huge, in my view, wealth of provision for affordable extra care, and therefore the choice is very wide to those people, and that's one of the reasons why I think perhaps the take-up of this particular scheme, which is located on a road junction that could be very noisy, no gardens, for example, no extensive gardens. I think they've got roof gardens and things, but that wouldn't be perhaps a first choice for anyone moving to a scheme, whether or not they are selling their own homes to buy a proportion of an apartment, or whether they would be social housing.
Let's get on to your, thank you for that. Let's get on to the assessment of need. And given the time, and given the fact that the numbers anyway aren't quibbled with, at least by the local authority, although of course Dr. Keith has put in some evidence on need, and she can ask you questions obviously about it. Could you try, this might be an unfair question, but try and give the inspector a sort of more of a whistle-stop headline tour through the way that you've analysed the numbers on need, rather than, if we spend too long going through it, I think we probably could take up all afternoon. So if you could try and distill the way that you've set out your analysis for the inspector, and I suppose in the end what he really needs is, what is the overall headline need figure for this sort of product within East Cambridgeshire, say?
Okay, first of all, just to clarify, and I know Dr. Keith has come to this point, all the need assessments that I have completed for this project have all been the need for private housing with care. I also do need assessments for care homes, but that has not been part of this assessment whatsoever. My need assessment has been updated. The proof of evidence updates my original planning need assessment. I've assessed need on the basis of the East Cambridgeshire District Council local authority area, and also market catchment. For the market catchment, and we can go to information that I have about market catchments, but I know it's been touched on already. The distances travelled are that 39% of people are likely to come from within 3 miles. 69%, just under 70% from within a 10-mile radius of the scheme. And I can also point to evidence from the Hazelden's appeal, in that 1/3 of moves were from within 5 miles. So that's very much.
Give the reference to that Hazelden's appeal decision.
Yeah, of course. It's CD 5.11, paragraph 95.
Okay. Sorry, go on. I cut you off.
My need assessment has been rebased on 2025. Which is updated from the original planning need assessment, and 2025 is used because it's the earliest the scheme could be made available. Okay,
so we're looking for 2025, trying to work out what the need is for, as you say, private extra care, not care homes or anything else. And just in broad brushstrokes, how have you approached that?
Okay, in my proof of evidence, Appendix F, page 24, page 25. I have provided an update of all the existing and planned supply in both the catchments that have been assessed.
Yeah.
So we've already been through the two existing private with care or extra care schemes within the two existing catchments. And at page 25, I've run through all the planned schemes, and by planned schemes, I mean those either with planning permission or those that are pending a decision.
Right.
And I'd like to make the point here that none of those planned schemes are located in the East Cambridgeshire District Council area.
To just be clear, are there any planned schemes for private extra care other than us in East Cambridgeshire as a whole?
No, none at all. Not for extra care.
Okay.
Not for private extra care, I should say.
Thank you.
I know this point was touched on yesterday. Ms. James said that there hadn't been any schemes, and that no one was coming forward with schemes in East Cambridgeshire. That isn't the case. There was one which I refer to actually in the original planning need assessment. There was previously a planned scheme in Soham.
Okay, what happened there?
That was, I have the planning reference, but it was an application made in 2019. And in fact, I refer to it also in my proof of evidence on page 14, paragraph 5.14. It was an extension to an existing care home, Soham Lodge, and 105 assisted living apartments. It was refused in April 2020, and the main comments were that it was adversely uncharacteristic within the surrounding area, detracts from rural character of locality, edge of settlement. Those were the main points made in that refusal. Okay.
So you look at the extent of existing provision, you look at the extent of planned provision, and what do you do next?
In terms of the methodology, Carterwood, and I use the methodology that's set out in Housing in Later Life, a toolkit for assessing the need for extra care accommodation for older people. And the need is based on 30 per thousand older people who require private extra care, and 10 per thousand aged over 75 who require private enhanced sheltered housing, both of which would fall under the housing with care definition. That leads to a gross need of 40 per thousand, or 4% of elderly people across the age group of 75 plus.
Just to pause there, there's no, if only there was no PPG that tells us exactly how to do all of this, but has this approach of taking a prevalence rate for 40 per thousand been looked at and approved in other appeal decisions?
The PPG sets out a variety of tools. It states that toolkits can be used to assess the need for housing with care, or for any form of accommodation with care. As this is private extra care, I just wanted to make this point. As this is private extra care, the need for care beds is in addition to and assessed separately from private extra care. And I say the need for care beds has not been assessed as part of this scheme. But yes, the PPG states that a variety of toolkits can be used, and Housing in Later Life has been used in other appeal decisions.
Okay.
Do you have any ones you can tell me?
Well, in terms of the appeal decisions that have covered it, Westmoreland, Bath.
Let's just do core document references.
Yeah.
So Westmoreland is core document 5.6.
Bath 5.7.
Yeah. I mean, there's quite a few
examples.
I mean, Stapleford, presumably, and then with 5.18.
Stapleford also.
I mean, there are shed loads. As Hazelden's nursery is 5.11.
There are various toolkits, and this is where we always have the discussion, I suppose, about which toolkit is the right one to use. Carterwood, in the planning need assessment that we put forward, use Housing in Later Life. The reason we use that toolkit is we consider it reflects the critical requirements, the national literature and the social care white paper, as it is now. It also reflects the increased future weighting of housing with care as an alternative to residential care within a care home or to sheltered housing, which provides no care. Sorry.
Let's not go to. I mean, because it might be that those numbers the numbers are contested. I don't know, but if they are, you can explain in your cross-examination why.
I think it's important to make the point that there is no single recognised methodology for assessment of need for specialist housing with care.
Indeed, which is why I said it's important for our inspector to have an eye on how it's been accepted by other inspectors elsewhere. So he's got some of the references now, and go away and have a look at that. Now, approaching it in that way, then, Ms. Venables, what do the numbers actually tell us in the end? What's the headline?
I think to go to the table, which will make it easier just to look at. If you look at my proof of evidence on page 15. Table 2.
Yes. Page 15, table 2. Okay. Yes.
And then I had a brief look at yesterday.
Yes.
I'll run through East Cambridgeshire, which is on the right-hand column.
Mm-hmm.
We look at the total population. We look at gross need, which is based, as I've run through earlier on the toolkit. We look at current provision, which is 57. There are no units pending decision, none granted permission, none planned whatsoever, apart from this scheme. So total supply is 57. The indicative net need, therefore, based on the operational year, which is 2025, which is where I've run the analysis, is for 361 additional private extra care units.
Okay.
I've done the same analysis based on the market catchment area, which takes in Cambridge City, South Cambridgeshire, and also parts of East, so West Sussex, and that analysis is on the same basis using the same prevalence rate, and that shows a net or an indicative net need of 844 units within that catchment area, and that's when those schemes that are likely to come forward by 2025 are also included.
Thank you. All right, so that's your approach. The inspector has the sort of headline numbers on both gross need and then net need for private extra care, having regard to existing supply, planned supply, and all the rest of it. So we can see it all tabulated there. Is there anything you'd like to say in addition to what you've said already about the GL Hearn document that was done, that was commissioned for the local authorities?
Before we move on to that,
I
just thought of something.
Please do.
So on table 2,
Yeah.
you have the market catchment area and you have the East Cambs area.
Yes.
But they overlap, don't they?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm wondering how you take account of that, or are they just really two completely separate figures? And I don't really.
They are completely separate figures. East Cambridgeshire is just East Cambridgeshire.
Okay.
The market catchment takes in population within that market catchment. The market catchment area, if you wanted to look at the plan of that market catchment, is contained within my original planning need assessment.
Yeah. Let me get
it up.
Yes, if you want, it's core document 1.18.
Yeah, and page 3 is probably the best place to look, really. There's a map there that shows the market catchment and the local authority catchment.
I think the way the numbers are done, sir, they're totally separate exercises. So albeit there's geographical overlap, you're looking at need and supply arising just within either the market catchment or just within East Cambridgeshire, whichever sort of way you're slicing it.
Okay.
And just to show you, on the market catchment on that particular table, I have put in the planned units that I have assessed will be available by 2025.
Yes.
And the information about that, the planned schemes, is all contained within my appendices at pages 25 to 27.
Well, your assessment in East Cambridgeshire of planned units by 2025 is 0.
Yeah, well, there are no planning applications for any extra care schemes apart from this one. All
right. Now, again, I see that we've slightly overrun, which is my fault, not yours, because of now I've had a lot of questions for you. But just a couple more things, and then we'll round off. So, are there any high-level comments in addition to what you've said already that you'd like to make on core document 4.10, the GL Hearn, housing needs for specific groups.
Okay, yes, there are a number of comments I want to make on it. The GL Hearn document, which is, as Ms James says, is completely up to date, it provides a separate need assessment and its own need assessment. And I must make the point, it utilises a different toolkit, but it provides its own need assessment for East Cambridgeshire. And that is, if you look at page of core document 4.10, table 98, which is on page 196.
Let's just find that 196. Okay, and did you say table 98?
Table 98 at the bottom of the page.
Yeah.
Okay. If you look, this is specifically for East Cambridgeshire, and it's assessing the timescale between 2020 and 2040. And if you look at the fourth line down, leasehold housing with care, that is the equivalent, the local authorities' terminology, the equivalent to private housing with care or private extra care. They use a housing demand per thousand of 23 units, which is lower than the one that we have used. They assume current supply of 77. And the reason I've used 57, they've used 77, it's not clear in this document. I think I know the reason for that, but I think it's because they have some shared ownership units that they're also including. So they've actually used a higher supply than I have used, but they have assessed that demand as at 2020 is 195 units. So the current shortfall, the surplus, and this is the important number, is 118.
Okay.
And that's based on 2020. So they're saying there is a shortfall of 118 private extra care units based on 2020.
All right. So
and they then go on to 2040 and state that there is a shortfall by 2040, of 271 private extra care units. So in order to have a figure that's based on 2025 on a straight line basis between 118 and 271, that would be 156 unit shortfall based on 2025.
Okay. So different ways of doing it, different numbers are produced. You've explained the basis of your model. I mean, these numbers aren't the same as yours, but where did it take us? I mean, what's the agreed position so far as you understand it in terms of the extent of the need for this sort of provision within East Cambridgeshire?
Well, both assessments, and albeit they use different toolkits, both assessments show that there is a current need, and that need also increases dramatically during the next 20 years because of the increased population growth.
Okay, right.
And also to the inspector, I have also within our document provided a projection which shows how that need increases. But I think given that we were at 361 existing need anyway, you'll just see within that document how that need increases. And I can refer you to the correct page if you'd like to know what that was. I take my figures up to 2042. And that's on page.
Yeah, can you give me a reference, please?
That's on page 17 of my proof of evidence. There is a table T4 which shows how the need increases over the 20 years from 2022 to 2042. Going back to the GL Hearn report as well, these are the points that I would like to make about the GL Hearn report. The tenure split that they have used in their assessment of need is based on 56 to 44 private to affordable ratio. Now, I would just question that, given that 69% of elderly people own their own homes, and I would just question whether that's appropriate. I think the split towards private should be higher.
I see.
And that would increase their shortfall figures. And I've calculated what it should be within my proof. but that's where one of my questions. The other important point to make in the GL Hearn report, and this is on page, I can refer you to page 191.
Yes.
Paragraph 8.45.
The shop at toolkit.
Yeah, I'd refer the inspector to the second bullet point at the bottom of the page.
Hmm.
And it says the housing LIN model has been influenced by existing levels of provision. This is on a nationwide basis. And their view on what future level of provision might be reasonable, taking account of how the market is developing, funding, availability, etc. And this is the crux. There is a degree to which the model and assumptions within it do not fully capture the growing recent private sector interest and involvement in the sector.
I see. So you're saying that when we get to those figures that you've just taken us to in the GL Hearn report, that say, you know, existing shortfall 118 projected to increase, you say treat that with a bit of caution.
They themselves say treat it with caution. They think it perhaps should be higher.
Okay.
The next, and this is the they've got two more points just on the GL Hearn report. My planning need addendum, which is CD 2.15.
Yes.
That planning need addendum covered in some detail another report to which I was requested to consider, and that other report is, I refer to it as the Cresser report, but it's the Older People's Housing, Care and Support Needs in Greater Cambridge report, which I reviewed as part of that planning need addendum.
Mm-hmm.
My addendum looked at the total supply of extra care within the local authority area, and it's basically what we did earlier as part of this assessment. And my response was, as part of that addendum, that there was a significant level of affordable extra care, but very, very little private provision. And the GL Hearn report actually confirms my findings. And it states that on paragraph within the GL Hearn report, page 192, paragraph 8.48. It states, while the Cresser approach arrives at similar recommendations regards future provision, the Cresser model recommends that by 2035, the supply of specialist housing will need to be 80% higher than present. And it goes into the figures. At the end of the it continues, a different balance is put forward as regards tenure of homes. That's within this report, within the GL Hearn report. Cresser suggests nearly 3,000 additional rental units will be required by 2035, but GL Hearn have actually broken that down into private and affordable units, as we've already run through.
Okay.
Okay, and then one final point to make: the Bath appeal decision.
Yes. Yes.
CD 5.7, paragraphs 86 and 87. And I don't know if you wanted me to run you through that, but I'll just let you know what it did. The appeal decision of Bath highlighted this point where existing provision was skewed towards affordable in a location where, this is in Bath, where 66% of older households were owner occupied.
Yes, and the inspector said at paragraph 87 of that decision, Inspector Catchpole 5.7 para 87, that it follows a significant uplift in provision is needed to ensure equitable access to improved health outcomes for all individuals, irrespective of their financial status, said the inspector. So do you have any reflections on that idea? I mean, that was in Bath, but what about here? Is that something that our inspector needs to think about too?
I think so, because in Bath, they had a 66% elderly home ownership. The government are keen to ensure that people have this choice, so that appeals to them, so that they do consider the option of downsizing or right sizing to alternative accommodation where care can be made available as they need it. in this location, you've got a situation where you've got 69% of older people who own their own homes, and yet only just over 20% of existing provision is available to them on the basis of private extra care. And there's nothing else available. And we already, with the GL Hearn report, you already have an existing need based on 2020, which has not been met.
So drawing it all together, and this is my last question really for you. I mean, we've looked together at the national policy. We've looked at your needs assessment. You've touched on some of the appeal decisions, PPG. We've looked at the numbers. We've also now had the benefit of hearing the local authorities' evidence on this question, which was yesterday through the evidence of Ms. James. Where do things stand? How would you crystallise it all to the inspector? How should he sort of report the matter of need?
Well, first of all, just to confirm, it is common ground that there is a need for the form of development proposed.
With the council, just to be clear, with the council. Common ground with the council, not with the Rule 6 party.
Sorry, common ground with the council.
Go on.
Then I would say that it is accepted that there is an acute, growing and unmet need for private housing with care in East Cambridgeshire. From the need assessments, the current shortfall of private extra care varies between need assessments and due to the use of different methodologies. In my view, the methodology that Carterwood and I use is correct because of the government. I think the fact that there is a push at the moment from government for housing with care as opposed to alternative forms of accommodation with care. But the identified current need is not being met. The need is increasing, and there is no planned supply in East Cambridgeshire.
Thank you. All right, and just finally on that, I mean, in case the inspector gets the idea that he's going to need to get his sort of fingers dirty picking between which model's appropriate and what the numbers show, I mean, does he have to, given the extensive common ground with the local authority on this, does he need to get into sort of detailed questions of which model's better and why?
No, I've been to appeals where we have had to address the use of different models.
Of course, yeah.
In some detail, and Walton-on-Thames is one of those. In recent appeals, that potentially has been an issue, particularly in parts of the southeast of the country, where there has been more development of private extra care. In this location, there's one scheme, and that isn't even a care village; it's an extra care standalone scheme, and therefore I think it's the fact that there is a need, and that need is increasing. It's a current need. And elderly people are not able to move to such schemes. They don't have the choice to move to such schemes, and that is the reason why these needs assessments are being undertaken. That need is now, and elderly people cannot afford to wait. If they do wait and they remain within their own homes, then they probably have no alternative other than moving into a nursing home in the later stages of their lives.
Are you saying then that both yourself and GL Hearn agree that there's a need, it's growing and it's unmet? It's just the level that's arguing, not the principles.
That's right.
Okay.
I'm very grateful, Ms. Venables. Thank you very much. And sorry we went slightly over that. I had more questions than I'd expected, but those are all my questions for Ms. Venables.
Okay, thank you. Next is cross-examination with Dr. Keith. Would you like a short break, either of you, or would you want to go straight into this? I don't mind.
I'm happy to proceed if Miss Venables is happy.
I'm happy.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much for your evidence. It was really clear and helpful for me to hear, so thank you. I've just got a few questions to run through, if that's all right. You went through some figures just now, explaining the need for private housing with care. Can I just be clear that the area you've analysed is the whole of East Cambridgeshire District Council?
Yes, it is.
Thank you. And the aimed market catchment, as you helpfully described, is about a 10-mile radius?
Yes, it is. It's about a 10-mile radius. I won't go into the specific reasons.
You know, I saw there's a map, isn't there?
Yeah, there's a map, and the reason it's not a circle, because I know people say, why isn't it a circle? It's because we use the census output areas, which are all shapes, and it's as circular as we can get.
I think it was well described in the evidence. You know, the catchment area. I'm not disputing that, and it includes, as you said, Cambridge City, some of West Suffolk, and East Cambridgeshire.
Yes, it does.
Yeah. And in table 2 that you went through, page 15 of core document 9.3, there are 30,002 people in the market catchment area.
If that's what's on the table, yes, that's correct.
Yeah, that's what you showed. And I thought it would just be helpful for the inspector for the following questions. That Bottisham catchment area goes to 6 Mile Bottom, which is 4 miles, Swaffham Prior, which is 3 miles, and Quay, which is 3 miles. So we have an approximate sort of 3-mile radius catchment area, which is thus smaller than the market catchment area. You would agree?
Yes, it is.
Yes.
When you say catchment, that's Bottisham.
Yeah, Bottisham surgery. Yes. Sorry, our catchment. Yeah, and our practice catchment currently has 5,902 patients, as I gave in my evidence. You agree with that?
Oh, I couldn't confirm what your catchment.
No one can really dispute that we have 5,900 patients. So it cannot really be said that the vast majority of residents to this development will come within our current catchment, because you've just agreed our current catchment is 5,902 and the market catchment is 30,002 residents. You see what I mean? The catchment that you're marketing at,
yes,
it's made to sound small when people say it's just a 10-mile radius, but actually it contains 30,000 possible residents. And so that is far larger than our current catchment. So the likelihood is people are coming from beyond our catchment area.
Yeah, this is the catchment for a care village. We don't base our catchments on the catchment of the local GP surgery.
Of course,
and obviously there are other GP surgeries available.
Yeah. And you've said that about 39% would come from within 3 miles.
That's based on research which has been undertaken into about 89 care villages across the country.
And it's very helpful. So about 39% of residents might be thought of as coming from within our current catchment. So thus 61% would be outside our current catchment area, our GP catchment area.
We had the figure for the 10-mile radius was approximately 70% of people would come from 10 miles. And yes, around 39% from 3 miles.
Yeah, thank you. So it adds weight to my evidence that new elderly residents will in fact be immigrating into our GP catchment area, because the market catchment area of this development is significantly greater than our GP surgery catchment area.
There will of course be people that come from outside of the GP catchment area, because your GP catchment area is very small. I would never work on, just to give you an idea, we would normally use a catchment area of around 5 miles for a care home and around 10 miles for an extra care village. So you need to base it on an average catchment area.
Of course, and I'm just trying to highlight some points that were made in other people's evidence, trying to reassure me that we're not going to have immigration, which is in fact incorrect. A previous witness has stated that a resident might be able to stay with their current GP, but are you aware that a GP has to ensure that they're able to do home visits, of course, particularly to elderly residents?
I don't have any experience of GP home visits and GP visitations or GP surgery, whether people can stay within catchment. I suppose it's the same with any elderly person that chooses to move elsewhere. If they choose to move to a care home which is outside of their catchment, then they could also choose to retain their existing GP. I suppose that's a matter of personal choice.
Yeah, well, they actually, I'll correct you there, they can only keep their same GP if the GP is willing to do home visits to their new residents. Mm-hmm. So if someone moves from outside our catchment, that would mean they are in a different GP surgery catchment. That new GP surgery would have to be agreeable to be doing home visits outside of their catchment area, which would be exceedingly unusual.
Yeah, I suppose that's a business decision for you as a GP surgery. If you have an elderly person who chooses to move outside of your catchment to go and live with family or for whatever reason, it's a decision that needs to be made by the surgery.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And currently, we have nobody outside of our catchment area that we are willing to do home visits for, and we have no elderly residents outside of our catchment area. So I think it would be highly unusual for a GP surgery outside of the catchment of our GP surgery to accept a patient from this development. It would seem a reasonable statement.
I don't have it's not in my area of expertise, I'm afraid.
You might be aware that, well, you are aware because I've said it a million times today, that we've got 229 residents in elderly care accommodation in Bottisham. They are all able and willing to stay in their previous GP surgery if they wanted to. Are you aware that not one of them has chosen to do so? They have all registered at Bottisham Medical Practice.
I wouldn't be aware of that, no, not unless I was partial or able to.
Moving on, you know, we've talked a lot about downsizing, right sizing, and I just wanted to sort of, you know, go over a few points. So residents can live in the retirement village from the age of 65, is my understanding.
Yes, if they are residents with a care need.
Yes.
And that will be assessed when they enter the care scheme. They would have probably a low-level care need, but they have a care need. That would be the minimum age.
From the age of 65. And they can stay until the end of their life if that is their wish.
If they choose to do so, but what I think is important to get across is that when you live in a care home, you have 24/7 care, either care within a residential home or nursing care within a nursing home. Within a care village, you have access to care. So it's not there available to you all the time. It's there and you have access to it. And it may be that you choose, and in fact, I'd like to refer to a document on this response, but it may be that you choose to have perhaps, you know, half an hour of care a day during the week. And then if you have an emergency, then you will ring a call button and someone will come running. But you are choosing the amount of care that you want each week. And that level of care may increase, but it will get to a stage where if the amount of care that you are choosing to purchase from the domiciliary care provider in the care village reaches a certain level, you would be better off living in a nursing home, because if your care needs are so great, it's going to cost you a fortune. It's just not. What I'd like to refer to is just CD 7.6, a document called Putting the Care in Housing with Care, and I think this possibly answers the question to an extent. But page 2 of that document.
Okay.
Under section 2, this is based on research into existing retirement communities. The third bullet point, care in integrated retirement communities shows itself to be flexible over time for residents receiving domiciliary care. The average number of hours of care required per week goes up from 9 in the first year of a resident's stay to 11.8 in the third year and 14.7 from the 7th year. So it just gives you and the inspector in particular some understanding of the sort of number of hours that are required of care per week by the domiciliary care provider that's based on site. And remember that care provider is there to assist with those levels of care.
I understand, but I think one of your unique selling points really, which was said, you know, in Mr. Simmons' opening statement, indeed, he used the words, that you could, care requirements change, but their home will not. So this reinforces the fact that you can stay until you die.
You can stay until you die, but it will, I suppose it's a decision for the resident
the decision
and
for
their family.
the individual, I understand. Yeah,
it's a decision for them, and it may be that their family decide that actually mum needs nursing.
and of course it may make cost sense for them to move, but no one's going to be evicted at the point of a terminal diagnosis.
No, but that's no different. That's true. But that's no different to an elderly person wanting to remain in their own home until they die, and buying in a domiciliary care from a domiciliary care provider that will travel around to people's own homes, wherever they may be, and also, I suppose, any needs that they have from the GP surgery to go to their own homes as well. We've got to remember this is their own home, albeit it's on site within a retirement care facility. It is their own home, and it's no different in many respects to them living in their own home in the community, albeit they have people surrounding them, they have support around them, they have other people around them that can provide care or provide assistance, for example, during the pandemic. But it's still their own home.
No, I understand. I mean, ownership is one of the key differences in my view. Moving on slightly, you were talking about these units helping with bed blocking.
Yes.
So, I mean, these units are available via leasehold and via rent, is that correct?
Historically, they have always been long leasehold for private extra care. More recently, and there are particular operators that I work with who have gone down the route of providing extra care facilities that are for rent, and by that it's an assured short hold tenancy. So it's not like a care home where you're paying by the week. No.
You're there for 6 months or 12 months or whatever.
That's right.
You buy a chunk of time.
An AST, and I think, again, I'd like to refer to another document, CD 7.5.
Yeah.
Which is Retirement Village and Extra Care Housing in England, operators' experience during the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, page 60, the bottom part of that page, if you're there.
Yeah.
Okay. It's one of the questions that was formed part of this research was the possibility that village schemes, and that's extra care schemes, could offer step-down facilities to smooth the discharge of non-COVID-19 patients. And as part of that survey, 57% could or might be able to offer step-down, and that was made up of 75% of the retirement village and extra care housing respondents. Or 44% of the retirement village all answered possibly only. And then if you go on to the following page, it just sets down the sorts of provision that some of these retirement village operators and extra care operators are starting to look at.
Yes, no, I understand. But if you were, say you were in hospital, yes, I can understand that it would speed your exit from hospital if you were already resident in this development.
Yeah.
But surely it takes a number of weeks to buy or arrange a tenancy agreement to move in.
What I would say to that is, as you're aware, as part of the assessment, people are normally assessed within their own homes. They are not assessed for either for their continuing care needs, whether they have any continuing care needs, or whether they would whatever needs they have, they would go home. Yes. Now, in my view, and I've seen this happen, families are perhaps concerned about mum or dad going back to their own home. If they're by themselves, they've got to then make sure that there is care available to them, and oversee that care and make sure that the mum or dad is actually receiving care at the appropriate time. It may be at that stage that they take the decision for a short term, and a tenancy can be set up relatively quickly when it's not an actual acquisition of a property. But for a short term, perhaps that mum or dad can move into a retirement village where they can receive care, know that they are being cared for, and know that there's someone overseeing them, the manager of the scheme, and live there to see what it's like. And maybe that they may choose to move there in the medium term, but it's an opportunity for them to move in more quickly than actually selling their own home and moving in there.
Wouldn't it be quite challenging to do that from your hospital bed? You'd be expecting people to move from their own residence, wouldn't you, not from the hospital?
if it was their family setting up, it may be challenging, but then no more challenging than moving someone back to their own home if it wasn't suitable for them.
Okay. So just thinking about workload impact, you've said that 24-hour carers are available to assist residents with their acute needs day or night. Is that correct?
They are available, yes. So if there was an emergency,
they pull a buzzer or something, and someone comes.
They're on site. They're based on site. They're not a.
And residents who qualify for NHS continuing healthcare would be allowed to live in this accommodation.
I think it would depend on their level of care need. I mean, if you very kindly ran through three, I assume, three of your existing patients, A, B, and C. From what you said, I would say that their care needs are too high to be within that scheme. However, if they were there to be,
all residents who receive NHS continuing healthcare have needs that high. There is no other level.
But they have to come out of hospital to be assessed, don't they?
Yes.
And they may well be assessed as not needing continuing healthcare. They may be there for reablement purposes as a step down intermediate care from hospital before they go back to their own homes. Or they may choose, because they're there, to remain there indefinitely.
That is true. Reablement is completely different from NHS continuing care. The point of my illustrations was to emphasise the severity of NHS continuing healthcare.
And those sorts of residents would not be the sorts of residents that the retirement village would aim to bring in at that stage in their lives.
I understand it might not be your aim, but it is in your evidence that they are able to live there.
Yeah, but in my evidence, I know you pointed to paragraph 5, I was using the fact that some of those units would potentially be available for market rent and enable those people to step down from hospital. But it was really the point that people could try before they buy. That was the main point there, and that's just the fact that more recently some apartments have been made available for rent, for market rent, rather than being long leasehold acquisitions.
That's helpful, thank you. But no resident is my understanding. No one would be declined a place based on their care needs. You know, if they were willing to pay for it and wanted it, because for what I'm thinking, for example, is you've got Mrs. A, who actually is quite keen to go for the walks, use the swimming pool, meet her friends in the restaurant, who's married to Mr. B, who's receiving NHS continuing healthcare. I think that is not an unrealistic scenario.
I agree with you, and that's why some care village operators choose to have a care home and extra care on one site. And Stapleford, and I can refer to the inspector to the Stapleford decision, that is potentially what may happen there. And there are other schemes that have a care home on site. With this particular scheme, there is no care or home on site. However, if that particular resident or a couple wanted to move to the scheme, it may be that the wife moves to the scheme and the husband lives at the care home, close by, because you have the opportunity here to utilise the existing care homes within the village.
True, but if they wanted to pay for the care and arrange it, they wouldn't actually be denied residency.
If they wanted to, but I think it's unlikely if the gentleman concerned needed 24-hour care in a nursing home. I don't think this would necessarily be the best option for him.
I understand. Okay. So just moving on slightly. Residents may initially have low care needs, which is what you're all saying you're hoping for. That's correct.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. But in time, they may have medium care needs.
Yes.
And in further time, they may have high care needs.
Yeah, I gave you the hours, the average hours just now.
No, it's helpful. Yeah, and care is adapted based on those changing requirements, which is one of the big marketing,
That's right. That's right. You're retaining the equity in your own property and just buying the care you need, rather than being in a far more expensive residential care home or nursing home. Probably less likely a nursing home, but where you're paying for full-time care.
So we've just been through a theoretical resident who has arrived with low care a few years later as medium care, and is now as high care. And they would not be asked to move based on their increased care requirements. Because after all, one of the key arguments was their care needs can change without their place of residence.
They would not be asked to move. They may choose to move, but they would not be asked to move.
Thank you. And therefore, you would understand how as a GP, I have to plan that all the residents potentially might develop high care needs in time. That it may be that when people move in, they all have low care needs. But as time develops, people age and their care needs thus increase.
I think it's important to make the point that an average of 8.7% of residents may move into a more expensive residential care home. And that's again from the same putting the care in housing with care, CD 7.6. If you want the page reference, it's page 3, section 5. So people do move on, but yeah. The aim is that they don't. The aim is that they buy in the care that they need, and they're able to live well and enjoy living within the care village. But unfortunately, as everyone has, even if they remain within their own homes, they may need to go into a care home.
Yes. Moving on to talk about the vacancies in care homes in Bottisham. I understand that we have disagreement that they're not similar places, but I do think it's important to highlight. So there are currently multiple vacancies in Queen's Court, Hilton Park and Oaklands. And in the November 2021 figures, 1 in 4 beds is currently vacant in my figures.
Yeah, I went through, in my proof of evidence, I went through the figures. At one point was that Eden View isn't a nursing home specifically for older people. It's a care home for those with a learning disability or an acquired brain injury. Mm-hmm. So I don't necessarily consider that should be included within the figures.
That's fine, but even if we remove that, that only deletes 10 residents.
Yeah.
So I'm happy to delete that from the figures because it frankly makes no difference to the average.
It doesn't, it's only 10 residents. Yeah. But the figures that I have taken are from the most recent inspection reports of those 3 homes. And at Queen's Court, in the last inspection report, occupancy was 94%. At Hilton Park, it was 79%. And at Oaklands, it was 92%.
You would appreciate, however, that those figures are from February 2021, which is almost a year ago. And my figures are November 2021. And of course, with COVID, many elderly people have died. Hence, there are enormous residencies. There are enormous vacancies because simply the beds have not been taken up because so many old people have died.
I understand that, and
horribly.
Yeah, I know. I appreciate that, and Carterwood, the company that I work with, have been monitoring the situation in care homes because we also deal with care homes, and it's absolutely tragic that people were as you know, were moved from hospital.
But I just think what I'm trying to emphasise is I think it's very important that the inspector uses the up-to-date figures of November 2021. They are up to date and show that we have vacancies of 1 in 4 beds. We cannot dispute that the up-to-date figures show greater vacancies than your figures from a year ago.
Can I make the point that I would not have access to those figures?
No, I understand, but I just want to be agreeable that you're not disputing my figures.
Well, I would question them because the total figures that you have for registration for each of those homes do not tally with the registration figures we have from the CQC on their inspection reports. So it would be useful to actually understand what those figures and whether they were accurate. But also make the point that
so is that sorry. Can you point to where those 2 sets of data points are, please?
Yep, so my figures are in my proof of evidence in one of the main tables, and I've quoted where I got the figures from. I got the figures from our NHS computer system, which you simply can, as a GP, I can go onto the computer system and see how many residents are registered at each address with us at that time, and also confirmed with the care home the number of residents they had at that time. I understand these are not freely available figures, but that's why I put where in the table I got the figures from. And I think it would be in no doubt that obviously with the number of deaths that occurred during COVID-19, of course, vacancies has increased in the last year.
Can I just make the point that my figures, or the occupancy levels that I have gleaned from the most recent CQC inspection reports of each of those homes, are contained in paragraph 8.10 on page 25 of my proof of evidence. I'd also like to make the point that care homes are very separate to extra care facilities and to care villages. Care villages have performed well compared to care homes during the pandemic. And I'd also like to make reference to a document being prepared by ADAS, which is CD 7.3. That report is based on the Association of Directors of Adult Social Services. And if you look at paragraph or page 4, it's the penultimate paragraph starting the pandemic.
Yeah.
And I think the important part here is pandemic has already changed the way we experience care and support. So many more services and contacts are being provided online. Others have changed beyond recognition. So many more of us are receiving care in our own homes, often from family members. Demand for care home places has reduced dramatically, and most shared spaces that have been traditionally used by day services have closed. Some potentially may never reopen. It is not too dramatic to say that we may never see care the same again. Then the report goes on. Refer you to page 9. On page 9, under statement 5, housing is central to care and to our lives. It then goes on to say every decision about care is also a decision about housing. And the paragraph goes on at the end of that paragraph: we must build more care and support around people's homes, expanding and evolving housing-based care and support, such as extra care housing. And it carries on, reform must be underpinned by the home first principle. This is likely to mean a much stronger emphasis on some existing types of care and support, which are housing-based, such as supported living and extra care housing, as well as new and innovative forms of care. In turn, this may mean a shift away from existing types of residential care, for example, a lesser reliance on long-stay, larger-scale care homes, although they may continue to play a key role in reablement and short-term care. Now, from the work that we do at Carterwood, we know very well that occupancy has fallen in care homes quite dramatically. Occupancy pre-pandemic was at around 92%, and it's fallen to around 80% at the lowest point during the pandemic. And slowly, gradually, numbers are starting to increase again, in line with the projected increases in elderly people. But elderly people and their families are also concerned about placing their relatives within a care home because they are worried that if there's another lockdown, they won't be able to visit them. Care homes have had restrictions on the number of new residents that they can take in because they've had issues. If they've had an outbreak of COVID within the home, they've not been able to take in new residents. So there are specific examples, and some of these care homes in Bottisham might be those examples, might come under this category, where they've not been able to take new residents in. And I think going forward, care homes, which are completely separate to all the analysis that I have done for extra care, and they are not comparable to extra care in terms of the type of provision of care within the service. But care homes have been hit very badly, and occupancy is increasing again, albeit slowly, but people are also very conscious that the care home bedrooms that they now choose to occupy, in many cases, they want full ensuite wet room bedrooms where residents can be cared for entirely within their own
bit, yeah.
And to have their own bedrooms and all the facilities in their own bedrooms if they need to self-isolate. And there are some examples, and I know one of the care homes in Bottisham doesn't provide all ensuite wet room bedrooms. But I think that's the issue. People are now choosing to find or choosing to buy into care homes if they need full-time care that have all those facilities. But that is a separate issue to this extra care village. But that's one of the reasons why perhaps those occupancy levels aren't increasing as rapidly as you may think.
Right, so what I'm trying, so I think the inspector just asked which table I was referring to. It was table 2 in my evidence, Mr. Woodwards.
Okay, thank you.
So it was just to highlight that if we have 1 in 4 vacancy, 1 in 4 beds vacant in care homes, I appreciate that extra care is different, but it does prove the point that we do have considerable vacancies in elderly care accommodation in Bottisham.
I think it proves the point that elderly people are seeking alternatives, because unfortunately care homes have been hit very badly because of the pandemic, as another reason.
Okay, moving on. We've mentioned this a number of times, so you might want to start screaming at me now. But in a registered care home, there's access to 24-hour care. We're not disagreeing about that. And in a registered care home, you can expect to stay until you die, is one of the very big benefits, really, of a registered care home. Would you agree?
I wouldn't agree, because it depends whether it's a residential care home or a nursing home. If you're in a residential care home...
Well, yeah, we can say either, but actually Queen's Court is so amazing. I think they're quite unique, but they do keep people to the end of life. Even though
and that's the thing. If you're in a residential care home and you need nursing care, you would need to move.
Yeah.
Also, and I know this from personal experience, if you're in a residential care home and you have a dementia care need, you may need to move to a specialist dementia care home. So it doesn't.
We're very lucky in Bottisham, because actually, so Queen's Court, our residential home, has both palliative care facilities and a dementia care unit within it. So it's a very unique residential care home. But we're in agreement that in a residential care home or nursing home, you have 24-hour care and you can stay until the end of your life. And in extra care housing, we are agreeable that there is access to 24-hour care. I'm not saying there's a carer that goes round, but you have access if you would have a fall, or have some sort of emergency need. You could call upon someone for your assistance.
Yes, you could.
Yeah, and we are agreeing that, I'm not saying everyone is going to, but you could stay until you die if you wish.
If you want to do in the same way you stay in your own home.
Indeed. So, and in extra care housing, it's been stated that the expected age is around 80 years old.
I think it was 70 to 80.
75 to 80, yeah.
Yeah, 70 to 80.
And in extra care housing, you would expect to have access to assistance with your medication. You'd expect carers to possibly call your family if necessary, and you'd expect them to be able to call the GP for assistance.
You would expect that, yes.
Yeah.
They could do that, yes.
And so you might therefore understand why, as a GP, I am planning for an extra care housing village in a similar way to how I plan for a care home.
Or how you would plan for an elderly person living within their own home.
Yes.
But it would not be any different to that. And of course, these people are living in their own homes. Their families may choose to call you, but the benefit of being within an extra care village, as opposed to being within their own home, is that they have domiciliary carers who
are available. But we are agreeable that I have to plan for 255 elderly residents to come on our patch. We're not in dispute about that.
But then you would need to plan whether or not, whatever form of development it may be. So, well, for example,
not if it was just ordinary housing, because this is very specific for the over 65s, and we have just agreed that the average age will be 75 to 80. So I have got to plan for 255 75 to 80-year-olds who, of course, at that age, will have medical needs.
It will depend if it is your surgery that will cover the whole of the scheme.
Yes, but we've earlier established that it is highly unlikely that any other surgery will take them on because they will be unwilling to do home visits.
But as Mr. Sedgwick said earlier, it is the CCG that needs to plan for these schemes.
Yes, but unfortunately, I'm the one who's talking today.
You're talking on behalf of the Bottisham medical practice,
Yes.
but it would be the CCG, as I understand it. And Mr. Sedgwick was the expert in that, I'm afraid. It would be the CCG that would plan or should plan for.
But I would just like to reiterate, for the benefit of the inspector, I am not aware of one resident within our catchment that is a patient elsewhere. We are an exceptional GP surgery, which at the moment is not doing us any favours, because everyone in these care homes and all the elderly residents in their houses want to be registered with us. It is highly unlikely that a GP surgery from outside our catchment would be agreeable to do home visits to this development, because they know they're in our catchment. They'll say, well, why aren't Bottisham sorting you out? They'd start emailing me saying, do your job. Why aren't you going? So we can't simply hope that another surgery might take them on, because trust me, we've tried with some of the other care homes. No one will voluntarily take on an elderly care establishment. Moving on before I get too annoyed. You talked about CQC registration in your evidence, and the requirement for registration with the CQC is determined by property ownership. It is sort of, what I mean by that is the care home becomes CQC registered because the resident doesn't own it. Do you see what I mean? So the care home is supplying the care and the accommodation. So as a whole, they become CQC registered, correct?
Yes.
And the extra care village is not CQC registered because the resident owns the home they're in, but the care provider will be CQC registered.
Yeah, that's the main difference, or one of the differences.
And that is the main difference, thank you, because it makes no difference to me as a GP who is CQC registered. It makes no difference at all, whether it's the care home or the domiciliary care company. Makes zero difference on the impact for me.
It does, because you're talking about people in their own homes. So the CQC register the domiciliary care provider that is based on site. There are domiciliary care providers across the country that provide domiciliary care into people's own homes, wherever they may live. And if they're living in the community, then that would be no difference in terms of the pet care being provided by a CQC registered domiciliary care provider. And it may be that very few, we've already been through the hours that are likely, or the average hours that are likely to be needed by those elderly people. And I think it's, it's a different thing. It's not the care village which is registered as the domiciliary care provider.
No, I understand. But I was just getting slightly frustrated earlier that the CQC was somehow being used as a big, massive difference. It makes very little difference, whether the building is registered or the carer is registered, but we'll move on. You'd expect a resident in a registered care home who'd fallen, you'd expect the carer to call a GP if required. That's correct, isn't it?
In a registered care home, if required, if necessitated as GP to go to the home.
You'd expect if a resident in an extra care housing facility had a fall, that the carer may call the GP if required.
If it was required, yes.
And you would expect a resident in a registered care home who was acutely confused that the carer might call a GP if required.
If required, I'm not a carer. I'm not sure what is required.
And you would expect if a resident in extra care housing became acutely confused and the carer was concerned, that they may well be likely to call the GP as well.
They may do if they couldn't deal with it themselves. Yeah. If they thought the GP was necessary, or a practice nurse or whatever, then that should be done.
Yes, and you would expect in the same way that in a registered care home, in a patient who is receiving palliative care, that a GP may be required to administer medication and assess their pain.
If they were receiving palliative care, yes.
And you would expect a resident in a retirement village who is receiving palliative care in the same way as a resident in a care home, that a carer may call a GP and say, I think they're in pain, I think they might need some administration of medication.
If a GP was required, in the same way as if a GP is required in someone's home where they've lived for many years.
Of course. But you'll appreciate with those patients, those three we've just discussed, the patient who's had a fall, the patient who's acutely confused, and the patient receiving palliative care, that for me, the GP, there's no difference between those three that were in a care home or in extra care housing. The outcome was the same for me as a GP.
The outcome may be the same for you, but that needs to be provided for by the CCG. They need to make sure that appropriate cover is available.
But thus, there is no material difference for the GP service required for those three patients, was there?
No, because if a GP is required, then a GP is required for anybody in this country, whether they're old or young.
Of course, yeah. It's been well documented in the news about the staff recruitment crisis in the care sector, and you'd agree with that?
Very well documented, particularly in light of the vaccines at the moment. Yes. Yeah,
that's true. And so current evidence is that staff recruitment and retention into the care sector is very challenging.
It is challenging, but then there are other sectors that have.
Of course, yeah, even like restaurants and everything, isn't it? But there are in fact multiple vacancies in the care sector within Bottisham itself right now, as demonstrated in the figures provided by Queen's Court. You agree with that?
Just before Ms Venables does, I obviously don't mind the question being asked if it helps you, Inspector, that when we get to sort of likelihood of recruits signing up to work in the scheme, I don't mind it being asked, but I think we are probably extending pretty far outside what Ms Venables' evidence is actually about, which is about the need, arising within East Cambridgeshire for more private extra care. So Dr. Keith's already given evidence about this. And if she wants to make submissions about it in the closings, that's absolutely fine. But I'm not sure the extent to which, if you like, our side can really help with what the vacancy picture looks like, or whether that's important.
Okay.
Obviously, sir, if you want Ms Venables to answer.
No, I think that's a fair comment. Yes, I'm not sure what the witness can add, Dr. Keith.
Okay, no, that's absolutely fine. I think I've finished my questions. Thank you very much, Ms Venables. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Keith and Ms Venables. Thank you. So we are relatively early finish.
Just to check, sir, do you have any? I don't think I've got any re-examination, but do you have any questions for Ms Venables?
That's a good point. I should.
Not at all.
I don't know why I forgot about re-examination, but
no.
I asked the questions I wanted during the course, although actually I did make a note earlier on, which I'm not sure is one of those notes I thought might just be answered at some point during the day, but I don't think it has. So I'm just going to double check what that was again. Yes. So if a development is providing on-site care, to what extent does that take pressure away from a GP practice because issues are resolved on site?
That's a good question. I mean, it's covered a bit by Mr Sedgwick's evidence, but also Ms Venables, do you want to say anything about that point about relieving pressure?
I'll obviously hear from Dr. Keith as well afterwards.
Of course, yeah.
I think and this I hope in part answers Dr. Keith's question just now that I didn't respond to. But if I refer you to CD 7.6, again, this is going back to recent research that has been completed in retirement care villages. On page 3, under section 3, it covers the reduction in staff that are needed because of the location of a number of older people on one site. So rather than having a domiciliary care provider that is working in the community, travelling between people's houses, it speeds up the level of care that is needed, or can serve to reduce the number of carers that are needed, because they're not travelling between appointments along country lanes or whatever. So that can reduce things. In terms of how care, I think your question was with regard to how it frees up GP numbers. Again, that was covered in the Extra Care Charitable Trust's response.
Before you leave, Ms Venables, just before you go there, it's actually on the same page that you've just taken us to, I think.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Page 3 of Core Doc 7.6. If you do see there's some commentary about.
Yes, sorry, it's under section 5. Yes, yeah. Yes, I'm sticking to the full report, but there, under section 5 of the same page, on page 3 of Core Document 7.6, it sets out the health and wellbeing benefits that save billions for the NHS and social care. And just to go through those full 3 bullet points, for residents, costs like GP, nurse, and hospital visits are reduced by 38%. That's because there are care staff on site that they see regularly, that perhaps rather than going to a GP appointment about a small issue, they can assist with that problem. Then the second bullet point is the £5.6 billion in savings we made for the health and social care system going forward, if the number of units within extra care schemes is increased, and also the fact that only a small proportion of residents actually move on to residential care home after living within a care village.
I mean, it would seem then that the sort of premise behind the inspector's question has quite a lot. There's quite a lot of data, isn't there, on this topic, isn't there?
There's a lot of data. So there was a report I was just going to refer you to, CD 7.1, which provides a wealth of information about the page 2 of that document. The introduction runs through the benefits and the findings of a research which took place over the space of 5 years within the Extra Care Charitable Trust's care villages. And there are a number of bullet points there in terms of personal health and healthcare costs at the bottom, which are most important. Do you want me to run through those?
No, it's okay.
It's at the bottom of that page. I think it's page 2.
Yeah, no, I'm just reading them now. I can obviously take this away to reading.
Yeah, at the end it says healthcare costs,
mm-hmm.
And then it provides a lot more detail within the report, but the bullet points are there for you.
Am I allowed to respond to your question?
Absolutely no. Well, I'm interested in your response. Obviously, you have lots of first-hand experience of this.
So, I mean, my first-hand experience would be two main points, really. If a development is understaffed, which is one of my concerns because I'm concerned about the recruitment crisis, it will lead to very stressed carers who are more likely to call us regularly because they haven't got the time to deal with each resident because they're just too stressed out because there's not enough of them. And that is what we're finding firsthand at the moment with elderly people, whether they're in the community or in care homes, that carers have less time than they used to have because there simply aren't enough of them. Secondly, there's an interesting medico-legal aspect that you might not be aware of, that a carer calls a GP for every single issue, be it a cough, a fall, a medication error, even if simply they gave 1 paracetamol instead of 2. But more commonly, the patient had a fall, is absolutely fine, but we have to go and assess the patient because medico-legally the carer is required to write down and document that they called the GP. And as a GP, I need to assess that patient because otherwise I'm considered negligent if something then happens to that GP and I've not seen them. So I appreciate that having carers present is of course of benefit to these elderly people, but it does not lower the workload immediately for me. It might lower hospital admission, but actually, ironically, lowering hospital admission may in fact increase my workload because it might be that we're keeping them at home when previously they might have gone to hospital. which is one big aim of the NHS at the moment. I don't dispute that. We do a lot of care at home now of residents that used to be in hospital. And patients often are going to be discharged sooner from hospital, as is provided in the evidence of Miss Venables and Mr. Sedgwick, discharged from hospital sooner because that care is available. But often that exacerbates the work on the GP, because they would have been in hospital for a bit longer having daily doctor visits, but we're in fact called in. So I think those are the three main issues for the GP about that. Thank you for asking the question.
Okay, thank you, and very helpful answers. Thank you. Yes, that is everything from myself. I think Mr. Simon, you said no re-exam from you.
That's right.
Okay, does anybody want to raise anything else before we finish for the day?
I suppose there's just one thing, not really, sir, but there's one thing that I just thought might be worth just repeating, which is on the back of the evidence that we've now heard today, I'm starting to suspect that if you've not visited a facility like this before, it might actually be really valuable, because we've now heard, I mean, I knew it was going to bubble up as a big issue today, which is why I offered it this morning. But it's, I think, actually I mean, depending on your own views and experience, sir, of course, it may be that you've seen lots of these things before, but not many people have, as you've heard.
Can I make a comment? Because I must admit, I've got quite grave concerns that the email that we've all been sent inviting Mr. Woodwards to the place in Wiltshire is, as I feared, an extreme sales pitch. It is not merely an invitation. There's about 3 paragraphs of selling how wonderful the place is. And I do worry that attending this place that none of us had heard of until you mentioned this morning is a significant advantage for the appellant, because it is an opportunity for another sales pitch. And you have pushed it upon him a number of times today, and it makes me feel that this is of benefit to you.
Yeah, okay. Just absolutely clear about this. There's no sales pitch whatsoever. What I am urging on the inspector is for him to consider whether or not it would assist him, not me, him, in reaching a view as to what sort of a scheme this is. And I've got to say, you know, we've all been working through lots of documents, but unfortunately, we've all seen that within close proximity of Bottisham, there is no, for just the way it is, it's just a fact. I'm not making a submission, it's just the way it is. He can't go to Ely and look at one because there isn't one. He can't go to, you know, Cambridge and look at one because there isn't one. If he wants to see a retirement care village, he's going to, if he wants to see one, he's going to have to go and find one. And, you know, where better than the operator who's proposing to operate this one in the event that permission's granted. Now, look, it will not be just Dr. Keith. It is not going to be me and the appellant's team taking him off down there to show him around. We can arrange that it is whoever, you know, the staff there to literally walk him around. He can walk around on his own, as long as he's supervised, obviously, to just experience the facility. If he, now turning back to the inspector, if you want to do it, we can arrange it. If you don't think it'd be useful, that's absolutely fine. But it's not some sort of Trojan horse. It's to try and make sure that the inquiry has a full and fair understanding of what the scheme is, which is obviously really important.
So I think it is important that I see one. I think it's also important that all parties are happy that the one I see is a relevant example, and also that all parties are happy that when I'm there, I'm simply looking at something and there's no new evidence being provided.
I think that's the important element, because in the email, I don't know if you've had time to read it, it is without doubt a sales pitch.
I'm very happy to you know, what's the right word, sort of stipulate and arrange with Rangeford that if and when the inspector goes and has a look at the facility, if that's what the outcome of this discussion is, that it's a matter of arriving and being shown around, look, here's this, here's that, point it out, without any sales brochure.
Yeah, I mean, what I think would not be fair is if it's someone senior within the establishment showing him around who obviously has an interest in this development going ahead.
I don't know who's going to be showing him around, but I can look into that. But I think I would agree with Dr. Keith. I think I did say earlier on this morning when I mentioned this for the first time, this is only the second time I've mentioned it, by the way, Dr. Keith, that it shouldn't be, you know, as all site visits in procedures like this are, they're not opportunities for people to bang on about how great their case is. It's a fact-finding mission for the inquiry.
What makes me slightly uncomfortable though is if I do go on a site visit and people are pointing things out, then normally they're representatives from both sides.
Well, unless it was oh, I see what you mean. Yeah, well.
So I would, even if there was just someone showing me around, I would only want to do that if there was also somebody from the other side there, and that becomes complicated when it's in Wiltshire and they all live in East Cambridgeshire. If it could be facilitated, 2 points. First of all, I would want agreement from all sides that it is actually an appropriate one for me to look at, and I think Dr. Keith deserves some time overnight to think about that rather than ask now. Secondly, if that was agreed, that it is a representative example of what is now being proposed, if it could be facilitated as a USV, so an unaccompanied site visit on some level.
Yeah.
I don't know how complicated that is, because I'm sure there are all sorts of difficulties with
sort of security
procedures you have and things, but maybe you could think about that as well. Otherwise, it might become too complex. I think I'd be uncomfortable going by myself with a representative of the appellant and no one else.
There wouldn't be a representative of the appellant. Sorry, I didn't know that was.
Well, yes, but I can see Dr. Keith's point here, by a company which clearly has an interest in the appeal.
Fine, fair enough. No, that's fine. I just wanted to be clear about that. There's no one a lot there.
But I think it would be clearly people who would want this development to go ahead.
Fine.
Instead of create a potential future operator.
No, that's absolutely that's absolutely fine. Or
one just alternative suggestion, and I don't know if this is possible, but it probably is I would expect that on the website, but because I only heard about them this morning, I would expect that on Rangeford Care website they've probably got videos of these places. I know it's not the same, but it would give Mr. Woodward's the idea of what it offers without any ulterior motive being thrown upon him.
There is another alternative too, because I would agree it's not the same, although no doubt the website's a great place to start. If, as Dr. Keith said, we could arrange someone to essentially open up the door and let you in and walk around, Inspector, but that someone is not some sort of director or CEO style person, but is a security guard, and I don't know who, a staff member, if you like, who has no commercial interest in the outcome of this appeal, then at least you could literally be shown around in the sense of, here's the door, go in, have a look around, without having any sort of, without having anyone actually give you any sales pitch. And I think it would be totally inappropriate for you to be given a sales pitch on the site. And so I agree with Dr. Keith on that. So anyway, let's reflect on it overnight, as Dr. Keith says, and we'll perhaps come back to you tomorrow.
Thank you. So if Mr. Stubbs, you can reflect on if it's possible to make it into an unaccompanied visit as far as possible. Yeah. And if Dr. Keith, if you could reflect on whether or not you think it is an appropriate example, and then we can talk about it again in the morning.
Will do.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you. Anything else? No,
sir, not from us.
Can I just ask one question just about the proceedings in the following days?
Yes.
On the timetable, there's a round table discussion, one of which has got my name next to, I think was the section 106 bit, and the other bit was about openness or something like that. I assume I am not speaking at that one.
No. So for the character and appearance of visual openness, no, you're not required. But then of course you are required later that day because Mr. Snedden, you'll be cross-examining. I think it is useful to have you the conditions in the section 106 as well, because there might be overlaps here with things which the practice might want. So unfortunately you only get half a day off, I'm afraid.
I just wanted to because I might be able to do something with my camera off.
Morning of Tuesday, yes, but I'm afraid only half a day, I'm afraid.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I just wanted to clarify that I'd understood correctly. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. So we'll be starting tomorrow at 9:30 again with Mr. Belcher. Okay,
thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. The inquiry is adjourned. Thank you.